Hey, this is Kyle here from Davis Tent, and I've got a 14 by 16 wall tent with the traditional poles. I thought I'd do a newer setup video and show you guys how to set up the traditional poles. Alright, so there's a couple of things with the traditional pole setup that I think might be easier to show when the tent is set up that are going to be important during the setup. Okay, one of the first things that we want to do is inside our new tent, rolled up inside the tent loosely, are going to be all the ropes for the tent. Now the ropes are going to have a knot on one end. Close to that knot's going to be the tensioner. Okay, what we're going to need to do with these is slide the knot into the tensioner, and then the portion in between the two ends of the tensioner is going to form your loop. It's going to go around your stake, and then to tighten everything up, you're going to end up sliding the metal tensioner up towards the tent. Okay, the other end of the rope, there's going to be no knot. All right, what we're going to want to do is take our eye bolts that are in our traditional pole set, and we're going to want to tie our rope to our eye bolts. Now there's all sorts of different knots that one can use. What I like to do is just a simple overhand knot as a stopper knot. Feed that through my eye bolt, and then I just do a simple two-turn slip knot. So I'm going to go around everything once, twice, and that's going to form two holes here around my my standing end here, and then I just slide that through and tighten everything up. And again, there's all sorts of knots you can use. This is just simple for me. A two-turn slip knot or arbor knot would be, I think, what a lot of people would call that. Okay, and then what we want to do is we want to take the nut off of the eye bolt, and we're going to put it on the grommet of the tent, all the grommets at the eaves. And when we put the nut back on the bottom side, we're only going to turn it about that much. Okay, this is going to make it easier to get our wall poles in. Just drop it into the grommet, and again, you're going to do this before you set the tent up, obviously, and get that nut on there just a couple turns. All the nut is doing for you is it's just making it so when you fold the tent up, the eye bolt doesn't get lost. It doesn't serve much of a purpose in the setup. It just makes it so you don't lose your eye bolt. And the reason why we left the nut looser is so we can move this eye bolt up and down. It's going to make it easier to get the wall pulled in. Once you get the eye bolt and the stake inside the wall pole, you simply just come to your tensioner, and with one hand you're going to grab the tensioner, and the other hand just grab the rope, or if you're close enough you can grab the wall pole or the eye bolt itself. Snug everything up, and the tension from everything working together is going to pull that wall tight. For your traditional pole set, you should have a bunch in the teens probably of 1/2-inch conduit wall poles. There should be some pieces that have white caps on the ends, and also have some steel pins as separate pieces on one end. These are going to be the uprights. The white cap's going to go on the bottom on the ground, and then the pin is going to go through the ridge pole to support the peak. And then you should also have a handful of pieces that have holes at some point in them, and those are going to correspond to the holes in the grommets. Okay, one of the first things that I like to do is make sure that my door is zipped, and then I set the stakes. The first stakes I'll set are going to be right here where the screen door is, or about 3 feet, 3.5 feet away from the zipper. That's going to make sure, ensure that my zipper is going to work easily if I set those stakes first, and not have a hard time getting the zipper up and down. The other thing that I want to make sure of before setting my tent up is that my stove jack flap is either tied up securely if I'm going to be using the stove, or in this case I'm not going to be using a stove, so my stove jack flap is tied down. So those are some things that we want to make sure of before we get started. Okay, so I've got my tent laid out in a somewhat of a rectangle. The first thing I'm going to do, I've got all my poles laid out as well, and I've also set my stakes around where they're going to need to go, so I can just grab them and put them in. So one of the first things we're going to do is along the back wall, we're going to stretch that fairly taut, but not super tight. The side walls we're just going to make in a straight line from there, and then across the front we're just going to make it in a straight line. We don't necessarily want to pull that really tight, and then what we'll do is we'll set our stakes that are a few feet away from the zipper first, and then go ahead and do our 4 corners. After that, we'll put up those corner wall pulls, and then the next step after that is going to be to go inside and assemble the ridge pull and the uprights. So get my corner wall pulls up, they're not super tight, but as you can see what that does is that's gonna lift the walls up for me and give me some room to get inside to work. So what I think is easiest is to assemble my ridge pole outside the tent and then just slide it in along the ground. Get the back upright up. There's no wind right now, so that I can go ahead and just come forward and do the front upright and then do the middle upright if I want. my ridge pole and uprights up. The 4 wall poles in. I haven't put any other wall poles in. What I like to do in the back is make sure that my rear upright is in line with the seams, and then I'll pull my sod cloth tight against the up tight underneath the back upright, and then get the bottom of that upright tied up against the wall. Okay, if you were putting a floor in your tent, you'd want to go ahead and put the floor in at this point. Just slide it underneath that back upright, and then your center upright can slide out of the way. Okay, so I've got my uprights in. My 4 wall poles are in the corners, are up, but they're kind of loose. And then what I'm going to do is go around, put in all the wall poles. I'll run the stakes across the back, and then maybe a few more stakes in the front if I want, and then tighten everything up. So once I have all my wall poles in but not tight, I typically like to start in the middle and get those really tight, and then kind of work my way around, do the 2 middle sides, and then work my way out from that and do the corners last. So again, the easiest way to tighten these up is to either grab the top of the wall pole and sort of lean back a little bit, or grab the top of the eye bolt, and then with your other hand grab the tensioner and slide it up as you're doing that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and tighten these up. Alright, so I've got my tent up, it's nice and tight. One thing that I like to do also, when I'm putting my rope stakes in, I'll leave a few inches sticking out of the ground, and then I'll get all my ropes nice and tight, and then I'll go back through and I'll actually push them further into the ground, or hammer them further into the ground to get everything tighter. So I've cut down the film on how this setup went, so it's easier to watch. It probably took me 20 to 25 minutes to get this tent up and weather worthy. And so in order for people, sometimes people don't really believe that you can set up a wall tent that fast. So after this, I'm just gonna have the full unredacted version if you still want to watch. Okay, but if you have any questions, or if you want to place an order, give us a call, 877-355-2267, or visit our website. It's davistent.com. Thanks for watching. For your traditional pole set, You should have a bunch in the teens probably of 1/2-inch conduit wall poles. There should be some pieces that have white caps on the ends, and also have some steel pins as separate pieces on one end. These are going to be the uprights. The white cap's going to go on the bottom on the ground, and then the pin is going to go through the ridge pole to support the peak. And then you should also have a handful of pieces that have holes at some point in them, and those are going to correspond to the holes in the grommets. Okay, one of the first things that I like to do is make sure that my door is zipped, and then I set the stakes. The first stakes I'll set are going to be right here where the screen door is, or about 3 feet, 3.5 feet away from the zipper. That's going to make sure ensure that my zipper is going to work easily if I set those stakes first, and not have a hard time getting the zipper up and down. The other thing that I want to make sure of before setting my tent up is that my stove jack flap is either tied up securely if I'm going to be using the stove, or in this case I'm not going to be using a stove, so my stove jack flap is tied down. So those are some things that we want to make sure of before we get started.